Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here. In tonight's video, we'll be looking at patch 10.1 PTR caster trinkets. Now, while there are some unique class-based ones, and while I am a Warlock, there's a handful of trinkets that work. Some are universal, and a good bit that work for basically every caster out there. Now, I have run Sims for all these trinkets. They have been changing a little bit over the past couple days or so, but I think we have a pretty good idea of what's looking good, what's looking subpar, and what's looking to be essentially best in slot currently heading into the current, well, I guess the last few days of 10.1 PTR. Now, there's going to be a lot of tuning coming over the next few days, I'd assume, on PTR. We haven't really gotten any class tuning at all. I would assume items get buffed and nerfed, but at this current point in time, gotta sort out what you got because we're running out of time. So, yeah. With all that being said, like usual, WeakOS add-ons and profiles, links down below to Twitch and Discord, we offer free for you guys. And I also want to mention that once again, the 10.1 Warlock PTR spreadsheet is indeed now live on Patreon. The Tier 3 Felguard rank or higher of Patreon gets early access to that. And yeah, that being said, let's just jump right into the video. All right, so briefly just talking about the 6 trinkets that are available in the raid and 3 that are probably the bigger ones from Mythic Plus. I wanted to briefly review them, talk about where they're good, where they're bad, and all that kind of stuff. Now, the eye level of these trinkets is not actually what they drop at necessarily in the raid. I mean, it's not when it comes to Mythic eye level. Rare trinkets do indeed still exist. Rare items still exist in the raid, whether you like it or not. They're still around, and that will vary based on difficulty level-wise, but they all still have the same effect, just more or less of that effect. So when it comes to the first trinket here, Bacon of the Beyond. This trinket is from the final boss, Scale Commander Sarkaleth. It is 450 at max eye level. Basically, passive mastery, a 2.5 minute cooldown on it, which gives, I guess, deals a large amount of damage, whether it's in single target or in AoE. It's split evenly between all them, but damage is also increased for each enemy hit up to 5 enemies total. So I've seen it do a tremendous amount of damage, crit for 800k in single target. The problem though is that it's 2.5 minutes, and looking at Sims and things, the duration, I guess the cooldown does seem a bit long comparatively to where it should be. It's a fun button to hit, it sounds awesome, but I feel like the CD is a bit too long. Even when it comes to heavy AoE, the ability is cool, does a lot of damage, hitting up to 5 targets, but unfortunately being a 2.5 minute cooldown, well, we know how long cooldowns are in Mythic Plus. So, the next trinket here is Vessel of Searing Shadows. I believe this is from Assault or Forgotten Experiments. I believe it's one of these two. Here we go. At Mythic, it is 441 item level, and it says equip baseline intellect. Your harmful spells have a chance to draw into unstable flames from the vessel, increasing your haste by 90 and dealing fire damage to you over half a minute. Upon reaching 5 stacks, so the haste stacks and anything else, the flames leap towards your target, combusting immediately, doing shadow damage, and then burning basically damage in a dot. TLDR, this is one of 2 damage/stat-based hybrid trinkets that are going to exist this tier. They're actually both pretty competitive in damage overall in Sims. We'll get to that in a minute or two here, but it's strong. It's from an earlier boss, Amalgamation Chambers number 2 in the raid, and it's also a baseline intellect trinket. Moving on from there, number 3, this is Igneous Flowstone, and it's a bit of a higher eye level, 441 on Vessel comparatively to this one being from Magma Rocks at 447, also baseline intellect. Basically, it waxes and wanes. You rise towards high tide every half a minute or fall towards low tide every half a minute. At low tide, your next harmful spell has a chance, or I guess guarantees you a chance, to gain 2.4k crit for 12 seconds. So there's your stat effect. And at high tide, the next spell launches a lava wave at your target, dealing 90k, a lot of damage, split between all nearby enemies. Now, this trinket and Vessel, we'll see in a minute here in Sims, are both simming pretty competitively as some of your higher options, and they're both these split stat/damage based effects, which are very cool. I like them a lot. You can't necessarily pop them with cooldowns because they're equip based trinkets, but at the same time, if they're strong, right? So next one here is Screaming Black Dragon Scale. This is a rare trinket from the first boss. It is universal across every spec or every class. Agi, intellect, strength. This is a throwback to the one that was in Nilotha on Wrathion, I believe. You literally get Shadow Flame Wings when it procs, has a high uptime, like the Wrathion trinket did as well. Baseline crit and leech, and an unused effect to do some damage, you know, if you're, I think, falling. Pretty cool. It's a rare item, though, so it's universally applicable. It sims pretty decently, but everyone's going to want it if it drops. Number 1, for the effect, and number 2, because it looks cool with the wings proccing. So there's that. Moving on from here, we have Ominous Chromatic Essence. Now, this trinket's a bit odd. This trinket drops in the raid. I believe it's from Rashok or somewhere. I'm not even sure where exactly. It's basically your passive stat stick. I don't even know where it's from at this point. Here it is. Your passive stat stick in the raid. Baseline intellect, equip, resonate with the power of your sworn dragonflight, granting you a bunch of secondary stats. Allies sworn to a different dragonflight gain 66 secondary stat from your resonance. You may only benefit from 1 resonance per flight, and on use, you can, attune to a different dragonflight. Now, I believe you can get haste, crit, mastery, verse, and if you attune to the shrine outside the raid, I believe it gives you an even split of all 4 secondary stats. And I believe it's the black dragonflight stone outside the raid. So you have a choice what you can do here. It might gain some value depending on your, I guess, party or raid attunements and things like that. It looks to be decent. It's baseline intellect and baseline secondary stats. And at the same time, there's not much else you can really ask for when it comes to a trinket. And finally, the last one for the raid is going to be your class trinket for warlocks. It's Neltharion, called Dominance. This trinket is exceptionally strong, the summoner version, which varies based on what class you're playing. It's 444 here, but if you're looking at it in the actual raid, it is actually a whopping 457 eye level, granting baseline passive haste, and the equip says casting spells and abilities gives you a stacking effect, essentially RNG based up to 10. Summoning your demonic tyrant, it works for infernal and dark lair as well, gives you basically 1200 intellect per stack and reduces your movement speed by 10%. But the movement speed decrease does not stack. It's 10% at 1 stack or 10 stacks. Now, if you're playing Destro, blasphemies that do proc this trinket, so you can't really get a 10 stack for your infernal, but infernal's 3 minutes long, so it's probably good that blasphemies proc this trinket, but it might not be as good for Destro as it is Demo and Af. The big thing here, this trinket basically enables double on use trinket combos again, because this is a bit misleading. It is an equipped trinket. However, you are guaranteed the effect whenever you pop your demonic tyrant or your infernal or your dark lair, essentially giving you an on-use trinket like Iridius Fragment, Talon, or Spoils kind of effect whenever you pop your CDs. You pop trinkets with CDs, and this effect is exceptionally strong in those settings because you can play this as your equipped trinket and then say play, I don't know, an unused trinket like Iridius Fragment, which is from Halls of Infusion in S2, or Time Breaching Talon, which is from Oldemon in Season 2, or Spoils of Neltharis, which is from Neltharis in Season 2. You have 3 awesome on-use based trinkets in S2 from Mythic Plus. Fragment being a huge 3-minute cooldown, giving you a lot of intellect just being front-loaded into whatever CD you're putting out. Talon being Talon from last season. Arcane was crazy with it. Some other specs were too. Demo being very strong. And Spoils being a 2-minute cooldown. So you have 2-minute cooldown, 2.5-minute cooldown, which is basically 3 at that point, and a 3-minute cooldown here. So being able to wear Neltharion's Call the Dominance, build stacks between big CD cast, and then go, all right, hit my Tyrant, triggering Neltharion's Call the Dominance, and then hit Iridius Fragment, hit Talon, hit Spoils. That's where a lot of the power lies. Now, that's the upside. The downside is that this trinket's rare. It's also from Echo Neltharion, which is the second to last boss, the penultimate boss. And as I love this trinket, I think it's very, very cool. But the one thing I'm not excited about is that just like how getting your tier set feels like, getting 2-piece, getting 4-piece, whatever class you're playing, if this trinket's good for you, until you get it, you don't feel complete. It feels like you're wearing 3 pieces of tier, 2 pieces of tier, you don't have 4-piece. You're missing an important part of your character. And while as cool as it is, think how Whispering Incarnate Icon's been all of S1. If you still don't have it. Alright, so getting into the Sims here, there are a few things to mention. I have run Sims for Demo, Destro, and Affliction. I am playing the new tier set across the board for 10.1. There has been one constant besides that in these Sims, and that is Whispering Incarnate Icon. This trinket has been in this slot for every single Sim. So this Sim is Iridius Fragment being here, with Incarnate Icon being here. This is Talon being here, with Incarnate Icon being here. Incarnate Icon was the constant. I wanted to sim every other trinket of relevance this patch with Incarnate Icon just to have a general idea of where they all sit. Now, we're not playing Incarnate Icon next patch later on the farm. It might be worth it in early prog if your tanks and healers are wearing them too, but I wanted to see where each trinket stacked up individually and go from there. Now, I'll run more in-depth sims the week of, I guess, the day before the patch launches or whatever, leading up to the raid, but this gives a good idea regardless. Now, I will say off the bat as well that Neltharion's Call to Dominance, this trinket here, the Clash trinket, is unfortunately broken, but the positive thing is that we know it's very good. So you can basically say Neltharion's Call to Dominance replaces Whispering Incarnate Icon. Now, at the same time, every trinket here has been run at a relevant eye level, meaning Mythic Plus trinkets they were run at 441, which is the highest eye level you can get from Valor upgrades. Not the Great Vault, but Valor upgrades. To a similar extent, the trinkets in the Raid, Flowstone, Searing Shadows, they're all at Mythic eye level. So this trinket here, 457, this 450, and these are whatever they are, I forgot. But anyway, so getting into demonology here. Unsurprisingly, I simmed Iridius Fragment, Talon, Flowstone, all the trinkets here. Iridius Fragment is on top by about 2000 DPS. A very strong effect, Iridius Fragment being right here. I'll just put it on for now. A 3-minute cooldown that basically gives you a large burst of damage to every single nether portal you open up, every other tyrant as well. And seeing as how our 2-piece and 4-piece work well around tyrant in the first place, Iridius Fragment looks to be a very solid option for demonology. It's also an unused trinket. And like we mentioned with Neltharions Call the Dominance, our class trinket, playing Neltharions Call the Dominance essentially makes it double on use, because this trinket triggers whenever you cast your Tyrant or your Dark Lair, Afna, for example, or your Infernals. Destro, Blasphemies are indeed proccing the trinket, but it triggers off of your main cooldown, so you're essentially getting double on use for demonology playing your class trinket with Iridius Fragment or Time Breaching Talon, or even Spoils of Neltharis, which is sitting right here. Now, outside of the M+ trinkets, the highest raid trinkets are actually Igneous Flowstone, which this is hard to do. Igneous Flowstone. Followed by Vessel of Searing Shadows, which is sitting Flowstone here, and Searing Shadows is here. Now, this is from Magma Rocks, but this is one of the 2 damage and secondary stat split hybrid trinkets, which is interesting to see. But hey, you know, I'll take it. I enjoy these kind of effects. And once again, they're also both baseline intellect. Now, the next highest trinket outside of both Igneous Flowstone and Searing Shadows from the Raid is actually sitting right here, Screaming Black Dragon Scale, followed very closely by Ominous Chromatic Flowstone. Now, Black Dragon Scale is here. This is the rare one from the first boss, which is universal. Int, Agi Strength. Likely not getting it unless you get it from the vault early on. Chromatic Flowstone being here, baseline intellect, baseline secondary stat, whatever you attune to, and then you have Bacon to the Beyond. I know it's Beacon, sitting here as probably the lowest option. Once again, awesome trinket. Probably needs some buffs. It's on the final boss. Likely just reduced the cooldown on it to 2 minutes or so, but for the most part, demonology, unsurprisingly, wants Iridius Fragment, and then Time Breaching Talon behind it. Now, the build I'm playing here is also not the full Pit Lord build. If I did end up playing full Pit Lord build, chances are high Iridius Fragment would be even higher comparatively to Talon. But still, we are playing Nether Portal. It's full Tyrant, Reign of Tyranny, full Hatred, and a point in Portal. This is the highest single target build I've seen so far for Demo on PTR. And that basically is that. Now, moving on here to Affliction. Affliction is sitting a few thousand DPS lower than Demonology, but interestingly enough, the top trinket is Igneous Flowstone. Your unused trinkets down here, Spoils of Neltharis, Time Breaching Talon, and Iridius Fragments, all a good bit lower. Now keep in mind, Affliction has both Haunt and Shadow's Embrace as damage modifiers, right? Haunt gives you a baseline 10% damage increase to whatever target Haunt is active on, and Shadow's Embrace is a stacking, I guess, increase as well, but it's 9% additional damage. So you're looking at 19% additional damage, essentially, on whatever target you're hitting in pure single target. That also increases trinket damage. So Igneous Flowstone, the damage part of that, this is so hard to do, I'm sorry. Like, the damage part of this effect, to a similar extent, Vessel of Searing Shadows, this here, the damage part here as well. And also, if you look, Beacon of the Beyond has jumped a substantial amount as well to being your second highest overall trinket in single target for AF. Once again, it does a large amount of damage in single target, and if you can increase that by basically 20% every time you use it, it gains a lot more value as well. So Affliction, similar to, I guess, Demo, if you're looking at just pure raid trinkets, Igneous Flowstone, Vessel is here, very close to Bacon and the Beyond as well. And then you have some Mythic Plus ones here. Dragon Scale being not bad, decent middle ground option. Clash Trinket, once again, is bugged, but it likely is pretty good. Probably your best, option for AF in your number 1 slot. And the number 2, quite possibly, could be Igneous Flowstone. And interestingly enough, I expected Spoils to be higher here, but I think the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. We're playing the Haunted Soul build of Affliction here, and look at the damage profile of this build. It is pretty boring, to say the least. You have these minor peaks and valleys here. You have lust on pull and everything, but there's just minor peaks and valleys along the way. There's not a whole lot of sway in your DPS. You have CDs here at basically the 2-minute mark, and you have you jump from doing 100k to 120k. You're back down to doing 90k basically the entire time. A relatively flat damage profile to a similar extent. Here's Vessel, about the same. Beacon to the Beyond could be a little higher when you use the actual trinket. You have a peak here, which is from your trinket, 2.5 minutes into the fight, to a similar extent right around here. And yeah, but if you compare that to Demonology, playing Igneous Fragment Demo's profile, a little bit different. You jump to a solid 370k here, whatever this is, and then back down to 50k. Demo does not sustain damage very well at all. Affliction, very good at damage sustained. So it depends what you're doing, but the more you think about it, it sort of makes sense that, hey, this passive trinket, Flowstone, damage increase from Haunt, Shadow's Embrace modifiers, also passive stat increase, Beacon to the Beyond, even Vessel of Searing Shadows, all solid options for Affliction. Moving on to Destro here. This is also a single target build of Destro. Now keep in mind, Neltharion's Call to Dominance is indeed proccing off of every blasphemy that you proc from Destro, your purple infernals with your right side of the class tree there. It is still not working in Sims, so once again, I would assume Neltharion's Call to Dominance goes here, like this, universally across the board. And to a similar extent, Igneous Flowstone, Vessel of Searing Shadows, Beacon to the Beyond, I know it's Beacon, Spoils of Neltharis, Screaming Black Dragon Scale, Igneous Fragment, Ominous Chromatic Flowstone, and Time Breaching Talon. Now, the thing that got me here is when I saw these Sims, number one, Spoils is a bit ahead of Igneous Fragment, so you get more uses, I guess technically in Sims, plus there's a downside to Igneous Fragment. The longer it goes, you lose stacks, right? Different from Demonology, you're not front-loading all your damage into the Igneous Fragment use with Pit Lord. It's more or less a huge intellect increase at the start, but then it trails off, and your Infernal lasts half a minute. Pit Lord lasts 10 seconds, and it has a large increase of intellect when you pop the trinket with it, right? Now, similarly to AF, well, even more so, Destro's damage profile is even flatter than Affliction's. Pulling up the Igneous Flowstone sim here, it is basically a straight line. Destro just maintains 98, 100k across the board. Here's your Infernal on pull, but here's second Infernal, roughly right in here. This is how unimpactful Infernal is for destruction. This is also the reason why Igneous Fragment, to a similar extent, Time Breaching Talon, is not that great for destruction. Because your Infernal gives some shard gen, which means a few more blasphemy procs, a few more resources here and there. But you hit 110k here, I'm sustaining 98 or 100k outside of my Infernal, roughly anyways. It's not that big of a deal. So having that passive trinket, once again, Igneous Flowstone, the crit chance, whenever it waxes, whenever it wanes the baseline damage proc, to a similar extent, Vessel of Searing Shadows, giving you baseline intellect on both these trinkets here, giving you a haste effect and or damage proc. Seems pretty good. Beacon to the Beyond, semi-high, probably just eye level, decent damage output overall. Dragon Scale, once again, middle of the pack. Igneous Fragment, Time Breaching Talon here, and Ominous Chromatic Flowstone here. I will note that I'm not sure if Chromatic Flowstone is taking into account other people in your raid giving you buffs from their Flowstones and things, so need to keep an eye on that. But either way, it's not that bad. This is also Ominous Chromatic Essence and not Flowstone, but same thing. Either way, just caught that. But, I mean, TLDR, surprisingly enough, Igneous Flowstone looks to be, like, your best option. For the most part, unless you're going for, you know, some odd, like, combination of trinkets. And then closely behind that, Vessel of Searing Shadows. Obviously, though, once again, I would assume playing Neltharion Call the Dominance across every spec. If not, certainly Demonology, and chances are very high, Destruction, in Affliction as well. But keep in mind, this trinket is rare. Now, there are two pretty unique interactions I wanted to show you here briefly before we end the video, and that is with both Igneous Flowstone and Neltharion's Call to Dominance. So, Igneous Flowstone, we mentioned, waxes and wanes. At low tide, your next spell you cast whenever you hit low tide grants you crit for 12 seconds. At high tide, the next spell you cast basically gives you a wave of lava that deals damage spread among your enemies. Now, the interesting thing here is that the moment you equip this trinket, you begin accruing stacks of the effect. It stacks 1, 2, 3, and it takes half a minute to reach well, either high or low tide. And once you do that, you then maintain that like effect essentially is stored for like a minute duration wise. Whenever you cast your next spell, it then triggers the effect, and then the next part starts stacking again. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but the first stack is the lava wave, which realistically I'd like to have crit instead of the lava wave on pull with CDs and things being popped. But at the same time, if you're able to play this or game this somehow, there's the actual lava wave effect. Here's the visual effect as well. There might be some way to game this. There's the lava wave where you can get the actual effect. And here is the max crit stack, ticking down, going to low tide, starting at max stacks. When this reaches 0, you will indeed get the crit effect. We'll hit it for a minute here and show you. So there could be some way to game this. I'm not really sure as to how, but either way, having both effects being this powerful makes the trinket feel fun, cool to play with, and all that. To a similar extent, here is my class trinket stacking up here. Complete RNG, there's a second stack there. This is going to hit 0, and there is the actual effect again. My next spell I cast gives me more crit, which jumps from 16 to a whopping 30%, and there is the other effect, building back once again towards the lava wave. So, interesting trinket there. Pretty unique, but honestly, I think it's actually a pretty cool trinket. I love the hybrid damage DPS, I guess, like secondary stat DPS trinkets, as long as they're relevant, which it's been a long time since they have actually been relevant. Now, the other trinket I want to mention here is the class trinket, or Warlocks, whatever class you're playing, if you're playing the Summoner one. So this trinket, for its lifespan, has been pretty, I guess, overstated, if you want to say that, or call it that. It gives you 1,000 intellect at 444, or 1,200 at 457 per stack you gain, and you can gain up to 10 stacks, which is exceptionally strong. But the interesting thing about this trinket that people are missing is that when you first cast your CDs on pull, you really don't have any stacks of the trinket, right? So let's say, for example, I'm not going to pop my main trinket here, my unused trinket being a Igneous fragment. Let's just say I'm opening up on pull here. I'm going into CDs, doing whatever. Say we just open up here. I'm going to build a tyrant without, it's going to be a bad tyrant. I'm going to build one without another portal stuff, right? So we're going to cast our Vile Fiend here, go into this. I was a little early in my Grim War, that was whatever, but no big deal. We'll cast some imps, do what we need to do. We'll do this, and we'll basically cast a tyrant, right? I have one stack here. One stack, which is 1k intellect, which is not nothing. It does add a bit of a boost to my tyrant, but in your opener at times, maybe you'll have one stack, sometimes two, maybe three if you're lucky. But over the course of the next minute or minute and a half, depending on whatever build you're playing in Demonology, you can accrue more stacks. I've seen one stack, I've seen 3, I've seen literal 10 stacks multiple times of this trinket going into second tyrant and the third tyrant. And like we mentioned, bad RNG here, no stacks at all. But like we mentioned, this trinket is essentially an on-use trinket. So whenever you pop the trinket, you can also, pop it by casting your tyrant. You can also pop your Igneous fragment, your spoils, your time-breaching talon, whatever you want to call it, and have a massive damage increase with essentially 2 on-use trinkets with your major cooldown, your major demon, which brings an exceptional amount of burst damage. Demonology is already known for being very bursty with Tyrant and Decon or Ring of Tyranny. If you factor in another portal, whether you're playing Pit Lord or not, Demonology becomes even more bursty. So it really depends on RNG. Right now we have 4 stacks. I've seen 10 at this point before, but once again, it just varies. We'll build into a portal here. We'll build to like 10 stacks. We'll wait a little while, but you'll see how much our damage will increase when we get an actual proc. I guess a Tyrant cast at 10 stacks in our Igneous fragment. It can be pretty insane. I think 6 is enough. We'll start building into this in a second here, but it can be pretty absurd. And this is what sort of scares me when it comes to it being a rare trinket. It's a cool effect, but until you obtain one, it's going to feel like you don't have all the power your class can sort of have. So we're going to portal, start TDs here. We have a 7 stack, praying for an 8 stack off of procs here. Maybe we'll get one. Maybe there's an 8 stack there. Perfect. And we'll bolt again. Give me a 9 stack maybe. I don't know. Trinket, Potion, Tyrant. And watch my damage spike. I'm at 70k here. Watch my damage climb here with CDs. 77, 80, 83, 88. We're climbing to 90k. Can we hit 100k? It's quite possible. 95. This is what I'm saying. You compare this trinket being an on-use trinket with an actual on-use trinket with a potion at times and jump 30,000 DPS. So this trinket's very, very strong. It's very, very cool. But at the same time, like, it's rare. So I guess best of luck in your vault week 1, 2, and 3. And if you're like our other Walking Guild, who still doesn't have a Whispering Incarnate icon, I guess best of luck in Season 2. So thanks for watching, guys. That should hopefully wrap it all up, and hopefully it answered any questions you might have had about caster trinkets heading into patch 10.1, both in Aberrus and I guess some in Mythic Plus. Now, in patch 10.0, a lot of trinkets are melee, I feel like. You had Puzzle Box, other just strong melee effects, Grief Torch, the Storm one, whatever it was, Boon from Vault the Incarnates. And while there are some strong melee-based trinkets in 10.1, casters have, I feel like, an equivalent to that, which we didn't have in 10.0. Iridius Fragment, Time-Breaching Talons, Spoils of Notherius, a handful of good trinkets in the raid, and hey, your class trinkets also probably pretty good too. I think it's pretty cool to also see the hybrid trinkets, the ones that have damage effects and stat effects on them, that do both, actually being competitive. The last time I think a damage trinket was effective, I guess competitive, like in an actual, like, you know, N-tier setting, without being day one of the patch, was like, I think, Leviathan's Lore and Ashar's Eternal Palace. So it's pretty cool to see that coming back. I like those effects, and yeah, hopefully it stays that way. Now, once again, like I said at the start, 10.1 is still changing a lot. PTR is likely getting some buffs and nerfs. Class tuning is all over the place at this point. So things could change in this video. If it does, I'll try and update the comment section below. And while I'm mentioning that, if you have any questions, put them down there as well. I'll be sure to get back to you if things do change. But for the most part, I think looking at testing, how things have been in raid testing, all that stuff, this is probably not changed very much because they're all relatively in line. So, all that being said, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like and sub buttons below. It helps out a ton. I also want to give one huge shout out again to my patrons, guys, for all support on Patreon. Thank you a million times. Really appreciate it. Once again, the 10.1 Warlock PTR spreadsheet is indeed now live on Patreon. The Tier 3 Fellow Guard rank or higher gets early access to that if you're interested. Should be a link up here as well as down below somewhere. And yeah, we are less than, what, 2 weeks away? Yeah, actually, it's... Good Lord. 2 weeks away from 10.1 going live. We have a lot of videos coming out, a lot of things to get done. I need a haircut again, but it's going to be pretty cool. Pretty awesome. 10.1 looks great. Aberrus looks insane. The fights look fun. At the same time, Warlock looks pretty good too. So, you know, we won there. But with that being said, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.